You've probably heard that buying a home is the American dream, but let's cut through the cliches for a second, because the real reason people say that has very little to do with white picket fences and a whole lot more to do with wealth. In fact, the difference in net worth between a homeowner and a renter isn't just big, it's absolutely staggering. And once you see the numbers for yourself, it's easy to understand why real estate is the largest source of wealth for the middle class in America. Let's start with the raw data. According to the most recent survey of consumer finances from the Federal Reserve, the median net worth of a homeowner in the U.S. is about $400,000. The median net worth of a renter? Just $10,000. The typical homeowner has almost 40 times the net worth of a typical renter. And yes, that's median, not average. So this isn't just a few billionaires skewing the numbers. This is the middle of the bell curve, and it's a gap that's only been growing. Now, if you're wondering how that's even possible, it helps to understand that home equity, the portion of your home you truly own after subtracting the mortgage, is often the single best asset for most families. When you make a mortgage payment, a chunk of that goes towards principal, meaning your equity grows every month. You're not just throwing money into a black hole like rent. It's more like a forced savings account, one that tends to appreciate over time. Imagine two households, both age 35. One decides to buy a modest $300,000 home, putting 10% down with a mortgage at a 6% interest rate. The other rents a similar 3-bedroom home in the same area, choosing not to buy, currently averaging about $2,350 per month according to apartments.com. 10 years later, the homeowner has been paying down their mortgage while their house is appreciated modestly at 3% per year. At that point, their home would be worth around $403,000. They've also paid down about $79,000 in principal. That means they're sitting on over $182,000 in equity, all while paying about the same in monthly costs as the renter, assuming nominal costs for maintenance and repairs. And in the renter's case, that's assuming their landlord never raised their rent over the 10-year period. So the renter has nothing to show for those monthly obligations, while the homeowner is sitting on a significant amount of equity. Using rough numbers, their $30,000 down payment turned into $182,000 in 10 years, providing them with a 20% annualized return on their investment. Meanwhile, the renter has been paying $2,300 a month in rent, probably a lot more by year 10 thanks to rent inflation. Over 10 years, they've spent around $282,000 on housing, but they've built zero equity for themselves. Now, if their rent was lower than owning, maybe they've invested the difference. But the reality is, most people don't invest the rent savings. The homeowner has been building equity automatically, month by month, while the renter has had to rely on willpower and discipline to save or invest money above and beyond their monthly rent. And with a payment like that, it's not exactly easy. Now, some people argue that renting isn't throwing money away if it's less expensive to rent and they invest the difference. And that's true in theory, but most people don't. According to Bankrate, 57% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency with savings. So the reality is, if someone's not building wealth through home equity, they're probably not building it anywhere else either. They're spending it. Now let's zoom out. Why is homeownership so powerful for building wealth? First, there's leverage. When you buy a home with a mortgage, you're using other people's money, usually the bank's, to purchase an asset that appreciates over time. That means even small increases in home value get multiplied, as well as decreases. If you put down 10% on a $300,000 house and it goes up just 3% in 1 year, which is on the low side of the national average, that's a $9,000 gain on a $30,000 investment, or a 30% return. That's a far cry from the average stock market return. Both of these instances might result in a negative return in any given year, obviously, but in general, the numbers look pretty good. Second, there's discipline. A mortgage forces you to make a fixed payment every month, part of which builds your equity. The structure of homeownership nudges people towards long-term wealth building without requiring them to come up with any extra money. You just live there. Third, homeowners are more likely to stay put, which doesn't cause but often correlates with financial stability. According to Pew Research, renters move far more frequently than homeowners. After all, they have that flexibility, but moving is still expensive, both financially and emotionally. Constant moving can lead to job instability and added costs. Homeowners benefit from consistency. Fourth, home prices tend to rise with inflation, sometimes faster. So in a way, owning a home acts as a hedge against inflation. While your fixed-rate mortgage stays the same, the value of your house and rents around you are likely increasing. Renters, on the other hand, often see their housing costs go up every year, which eats into their ability to save. Now, the reason a homeowner's net worth is higher isn't solely because of the home itself. More often than not, the path to homeownership demands a certain level of financial discipline. From setting money aside for a down payment to meeting mortgage approval standards and staying current on taxes, insurance, and ongoing maintenance, homeowners usually have to demonstrate some level of financial planning and responsibility. That's not to say every homeowner is a financial expert or that every renter lacks discipline. Not at all. But the very act of purchasing a home tends to attract individuals who at least have some structure to their finances. Owning a home isn't a guaranteed win. There are risks, maintenance costs, property taxes, potential dips in the housing market. But over the long haul, the odds favor the homeowner. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Homeownership doesn't increase net worth. It can also impact retirement readiness. Having a paid-off home can make a huge difference in your retirement budget. Just think about heading into retirement without a mortgage or monthly rent to worry about. That alone can significantly lower your living expenses. Yes, you'll still have to cover things like property taxes, insurance, and utilities, and those might go up a little bit over time, but they usually won't climb anywhere near as fast as rent tends to. It's one of the biggest financial advantages of owning your home long term. In lowering your housing costs is the single best way for most people to reduce the amount of income needed during retirement, and by a lot. That's a massive relief, especially when you're living on a fixed income. Renters, on the other hand, might see their housing costs continue to rise a lot even after they stop working. According to a Harvard study on housing and aging, nearly 80% of older homeowners own their homes free and clear. This means they're paying for taxes, insurance, and maintenance, but not rent or a mortgage. That's a huge advantage in retirement. In contrast, older renters face much higher housing burdens as a share of income. In fact, more than 50% of elderly renters are considered cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Not everyone can or should buy a home. In some high-cost areas, or when interest rates and prices are high, the math just doesn't work out. If you can rent a place much cheaper than owning and invest that money consistently, that might be the way to go. And for people who move frequently, renting can make more sense. But long-term, the data overwhelmingly shows that homeownership builds wealth in ways that renting rarely does. Some argue that homes aren't investments, they're places to live, and that's true. But the reality is, for most Americans, their home becomes their biggest investment, whether they plan on it or not. It's a store of value, a financial anchor, and a hedge against rising rents. Just because it's not providing monthly cash flow doesn't mean it's not helping you build wealth and increase your net worth, and it can always be sold or the equity can be tapped. It's also a pathway to intergenerational wealth. According to a study by the Urban Institute, homeownership is one of the strongest predictors of whether your kids will also own homes, and that ripple effect impacts wealth inequality for generations. And here's the surprising part. Even modest homes in average neighborhoods can build significant wealth over time. You don't need to buy a huge house or perfectly time the market. Simply staying in one place, making consistent mortgage payments, and allowing time to work in your favor can make a big difference. You don't have to perfectly predict when prices and interest rates will drop to 20-year lows to make a smart choice. It's not about buying and selling every year or constantly remodeling to follow every new trend. Just letting the home naturally appreciate in value while steadily chipping away at the mortgage is enough to create long-term financial gains. Let's be clear, this isn't about criticizing renters. In many situations, renting is the more practical option. It provides flexibility for those who move frequently, fewer responsibilities when it comes to repairs and maintenance, and less financial risk. But for most people, renting just doesn't lead to the same kind of long-term wealth accumulation that owning a home can offer, unless you're one of the rare few who consistently rents for less than it costs to own and diligently invests the savings every single month. And that's really the key takeaway here. If you're renting and you want to build wealth, you'll have to be more aggressive with your savings and investments. You'll need to simulate the forced savings that a mortgage provides. It's possible, it's just harder, because when rent checks disappear, mortgage payments build something. And over 10, 20, or 30 years, that adds up to be a very real, very powerful difference in net worth. The net worth gap between homeowners and renters is honestly pretty surprising. And it's not just about owning a piece of property. The habits that are tied with homeownership, like sticking to a budget, paying down a mortgage, and letting equity build, tend to add up. And that kind of steady growth can make a huge difference, especially as the years go by and you head into retirement.